Hi everyone, welcome back to the Far Out Wisdom Podcast. I hope that you're having a wonderful day. In this episode, Isaac J. Miller from the Daily Archetype and I dive into the article by Alexander Blum called Jung and the Trumpian Shadow. When we deny the existence of our shadow, we will end up projecting it out onto the world. Remember, all of us have opposites within us. Masculine, feminine, night and day, happy, sad. Radicals and extremists are a symptom of those archetypes. Before I let you guys go, I would like to introduce our sponsor of the Far Out Wisdom Podcast. Rebecca Ijen, an astrologer for 25 plus years, specialized in relationships. From everyday decisions to critical life-altering moments, Rebecca shares your practical wisdom and guidance for your life's journey in becoming who you're meant to be. Using Jungian psychology, Rebecca guides you to see the potential that hides your hidden self, your shadow. Sign up now for the Shadow Work in 7th House webinar or have a private consultation and find out how the universe has always had your back. You just didn't know it. To receive a consultation from Ms. Ijen, please visit her website at shadowdance.com. And once again, shadowdance.com. I will link all her information down below, and please donate to FOW to support this podcast, and make sure to visit the sponsor of the Far Out Wisdom Podcast. As always, guys, stay far out. Bye. Okay, Isaac and I were talking about gangbangings.
What? That's how you want to start it? Oh, it's recording.
Okay. We were talking about my trip to Nevada.
You got gangbanged in Nevada? I guess if you're going to do it, that's the place to do it.
We were talking about my trip in Nevada, and I was feeling like, and so the place that I visit, if you guys, probably you guys know already. I'm talking to the audience. You guys probably know that I'm gonna get the fuck out of California. So Isaac's gonna stay. I don't know why.
Oh, I didn't say that. I just haven't made my plan for escape yet.
Well,
we'll see. I'm keeping it open for right now.
Just letting you know, like the first person that they're gonna go after, if California falls to the ground, it's you. Okay?
Yeah, I believe that. I talk shit about California constantly.
You can see Isaac like against the wall.
Yeah.
But like, anyways, I went to Tonopah, Nevada, and it's pretty.
What's
like
that word, Nevada?
Tonopah.
Tonopah. Okay, great.
What do you think? I decode like some Asian?
No, I don't know. That's just a strange sounding name. It's like, is that a Native American thing or something?
No, it's like with Tonopah. I think it's like Sorry, I'm just coughing, but I'm gonna explain why I have been coughing.
But yeah, like, everybody's wondering. Everyone's at the edge of their seat with this gangbang story.
So like we were in Tonopah, Nevada, and so it's, you hear a lot about Tonopah in the
Nobody hears about Tonopah.
No, the Joe Rogan podcast. If everybody's a fan of Joe Rogan, so he had on a guest where they talk about UFO, and so Tonopah is like the middle ground of UFO spotting. So I'm gonna be living there to be with close to family, but
the alien family.
Yeah, that's where I belong. I mean, probably like an SJW is gonna hear this. Like, are you saying that she's an alien, Isaac?
Yeah. Like, just because brown people want to live close to aliens doesn't mean that they are aliens. Like, aliens are people too. So they're from another planet. Like, they have just as much right to be here as anybody else. Now, give them some welfare and free healthcare right away. And some
for your information.
For your information, aliens, no matter how high their intelligence is, they need free education immediately.
And so all the I came back and I started to feel kind of sick a little bit. So in Nevada, it's kind of it's red, but it's not deep state red. Does that make sense?
What?
Like it's not like, you know what I'm saying? Like red as in Republican. That's what I mean.
I know, but
yeah, it's not deep state red. You know what I mean?
Vocabulary is all confusing because deep state means like the
Illuminati
corruption people.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's not what I mean. I'm not saying that Nevada has a bunch of hookers, casinos that the deep state operate.
All right.
But anyways, it's like it's pretty like kind of chill because the fact that they like I think prostitution is legal, and I believe like the casino and stuff is legal. So that's where majority of
it's statewide.
Yeah, statewide. So, anyways, I'm not saying that I caught COVID at a hooker bar. That's not what I'm saying. But I think
something about getting gangbanged though.
Like I was getting okay. So I came back and I started to kind of get a lot of like stomach aches, and I started to get like kind of bloated, and then I had like a sore throat. Right?
What?
He's laughing at my COVID story.
Wow.
No, like I felt really sick, dude. And so this is where we were talking about the gangbang. Like COVID feels like that. It feels like
So that's where the gangbang came in, folks. Because she said having COVID feels like getting like gangbanged, and I said, well, I don't have any gangbang experience, so I don't know how that compares.
It feels like. Let me explain it.
Are you explaining COVID or explaining how it feels to get gangbanged? Because again, I've never done that yet.
He said yet because there's hope.
Yeah, if I go to Nevada, where it's legal.
Where it's legal, but
well,
anyways,
I can pay to get it legally done. Legally pay to get it done.
So it feels like, and this is where I make the analogy. I always make an analogy of like fucking sexual stuff because people relate. But it feels like the cold and flu, like you're getting your ass kicked with the cold and flu for like 3 fucking days straight. And of course, afterwards, it inflames your lungs and stuff like that. So I called my doctor and I said to him, I said, I think I caught COVID because I'm showing the symptoms. And you know what he said to me? He said, because, like on the news, the mainstream media, they always say, oh, well, if you caught COVID, oh my God, the world's going to fucking end. Oh my God, you're going to see Jesus in like 3 fucking days. Right. So, but literally he said, okay, well, if you feel like you have the symptoms, because with the test kits, you have to like make an appointment. It's really like, it's not really expensive. I'm not really sure how that works, but they choose who to test. Does that make sense? Like they choose who to test, like to save the kit, like the resources and stuff. So I totally understand. But like, he said, I my test kit is limited. But if you, I don't want to send you to, outside when you're not supposed to be outside if you caught COVID. So, and I said, okay. So he told me he was like vitamin D, vitamin C, a lot of rest, liquids, and liquids mean water. And then he was like, stress-free. He go, don't push yourself. And he said that my body's going to be inflamed like right afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, so
it does sound like a gangbang now, actually. You get lots of D, lots of C, and lots of liquids and inflaming when you're done.
Lots of E in me.
Wow, okay, everyone. All together now. Okay. Now I get the analogy. Thanks for straightening that out.
And that's what it feels like. I mean, but see, the thing is, like, it's like, so today we're going to be talking about Jung and the Trumpian shadow, and you're going to see the correlation what we're trying to do. It's pretty much like the tarantula episode, but this time we're going to be talking in Jungian archetype, and that is the shadow. Right? Is it the shadow, the archetype? I might be wrong. Correct me.
Yes, that's what the article mentioned is the Trumpian shadow, which I don't know how this article writer came up with that word Trumpian, but I guess he's just saying the shadow from Trump. But by the way, it's important to notice this article is from October 2017, which is fine, but it's just not like a recent Trumpian shadow thing. So
yeah, anyway. It's really it's from Quillette. We're gonna both link that below. But sorry, just I was laughing so hard that I had to mute myself. But anyways, this article we're talking about it's Jung and the Trumpian shadow, and with COVID and everything that's going on at the moment, it's really kind of you start to see like a bad side of people,
right?
especially with social media. It makes everything very
Oh yeah.
polluted. And I think you talk about this with the archive, the guys in the archive, where you brought that up,
Mm.
where Isaac's not a political guy. If you guys are friends with him on Facebook, you'll see that that's not really his what's that word, shtick. Shtick. His shtick. That's not really his thing, because he's into the young and stuff. And so with the recent election that happened, I think maybe possibly with the election, with the results, it kind of just like unbelievable.
Yeah, although we still don't know what the results were, and we probably never will.
Yeah, we probably never will.
Because, like, okay, in 2000, it was a little bit different because it was more of a recount issue than a fraud issue. They just had they had issues with, like, if they thought the ballots were counted properly, because, and for those who don't remember or know because they were younger, a lot of the ballots in Florida that kind of decided the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore was that they were doing these ballots where you like press to vote to select your option. You like poke out a hole or something like that.
Yeah.
And so then the big thing was called dimpled chads. And so in other words, they weren't sure if some of them were counted properly because some of them were questionable, like if they selected option 1, option 2, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But what they did is, and it took them, like, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, or I don't know how, maybe it was like only a few days to do the recount properly, and then some other legal battles and this and that. Mm-hmm. But what they did was, by the end of that, everybody was on the same page. Like, okay, cool. It was a close race, and maybe Al Gore made up a couple votes here and there, whatever, but didn't change the result. But now this time it's like, I just don't get the concept that when we vote, if there's fraud questioning to it for any reason, then we're basically...
Yeah.
Well, no, but we were basically just told to shut up.
Yep.
Where it's like, it should be like, oh, there's some questionableness for any reason. Let's do an investigation. It's 2020, where we should be prepared for that, and we should have all the resources ready. Whether that takes a few days or a few weeks, we'll get it done before Inauguration Day. So let's resolve any and all question marks. But now it's just like, shut the F up. Screw you. You can't question it. And so whatever happens, whether, on January 6th or January 20th and whatever else, mm-hmm. there's going to be these question marks forever. I mean, and it'll drag on through court forever, and what that will do, by the way, to sort of link it to today's topic, not of gangbanging, but of the Trumpian shadow. What that'll do is it will ignite the divide much, much more, because, and a lot of people keep like recalling back to how things were in, the last 4 years with all the like Russian collusion, impeachment. But this will be like magnified times 100. And like all that Russian collusion stuff, like nobody really cared because they never came up with any evidence or anything other than hearsay. And people having their feelings. They found
nothing, by the way, guys. They found absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and with this one, we found like endless amounts of evidence and not just evidence. And I know we've talked about this a bit on ours, and also ones that you did with McCall and everything that gave mm-hmm. pretty good details. But not just evidence, but we know for an absolute fact that the laws that were adjusted so that certain states could have mail out ballots, so to speak, mm-hmm. was illegally done, or just kind of like look the other way on their constitution. And so
it was like they prepared for it.
Yeah, and even before COVID, like they made these adjustments to their mail out ballot rules, at least in Pennsylvania, back in like October of 2019. Mm-hmm. But they never bothered to do it the way that's constitutional for their state. So it's not even like, I wonder if there is some of these questionable things. It's like, we know for sure. And we could do the investigations to say, okay, look, there was this and this and this questionable things up to this level. And so whether the Supreme Court or and I don't think it's a conspiracy theory, I think it's a fact. The reason it's not looked into enough is because of what is potentially going to be happening this month with January 6th and between January 6th and January 20th, where they can potentially make the election results go a lot of different directions based on just the fact that it's contested. So, in other words, if they said, oh, sure, let's investigate that, then it's more solidified that it's contested. So it's more solidified that they would be able to say, okay, this is contested, so it needs to be decided not by the Electoral College per se, but by the House of Representatives. And the thing with the House of Representatives deciding, it's not the House of Representatives majority, it's the majority of the House of Representative states in this case, which is always GOP. So that's why that's going on. And again, this is on topic because over this month and then over the next years will just more and more and more and more bring out that divide. Although the only thing that will make it not divisive is people that are just gonna be like, I'm so fucking tired of hearing this. do the fuck you want. This is so old, guys.
Seriously, man. Like, I'm getting tired of it too. Like, I think like a lot of, and just like I said many times before, and we said it over and over again. Me and Isaac, we said over and over again that we're not radicals. If you guys listen to the conversation that we have, we're not. We're like the Obama era leftists, if that makes sense. Not necessarily like Obama-ish, but we were like the liberals. Like, we make fun of everybody. We have a sense of humor. We were against political correctness.
Well, we hate all politicians approximately equally because they all screw things up.
Exactly.
I mean, some a little more, a little less than others, but they all need to be fired.
Yeah, and just like the other day, I said that Mitch McConnell looks like a fucking anorectic penis. You know, like, I say these things, okay, because I don't agree with having these political figures making, you know, like, our livelihood is in the hands of these corrupt politicians, and it doesn't matter.
They keep putting out these what they call omnibus bills, which just should be completely illegal. It's like something, you know, in like, as a child, that is completely shifty and deceptive, that it's like, okay, let's make an agreement on who pays for lunch. Okay, Bob will pay for lunch. And in the agreement that Bob will pay for lunch, it's also the agreement that he's going to like take Bob's dog and that he's going to take his car and his wife and everything else. Because that's basically what they do when they're like, oh, we're going to make this bill to give people $600. Okay, and we're also going to send $1 trillion to all these other countries for whatever random reasons, and we're going to put in what is that? Like, criminalize sharing things on the internet up to $30,000 and life in prison, or not life in prison, but years in prison for violating copyright, even just on sharing something on like Zoom calls.
We're in a pandemic right now. That's not the thing that we should be concerned about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That should be done
separately. Like, if they want to talk about those kind of bills, like, sure, intellectual property needs to be protected, this and that. Maybe that needs to be discussed and talked about. But to just like slip it into a pandemic relief bill is complete, like, anyone, it's common sense, shifty, shadow, fuck you, we don't give a shit about you, citizenship.
Yes. So this article we were supposed to talk about for like quite some time. And it's just like, it started the whole thing. So we have a mutual friend, Connor Dirting, from the archive.
Sure.
Yeah. From the archive. And he was, the thing with Connor is like they released an episode talking about like social media.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna take jabs, okay? Those two little adorable pigeons. But what I'm saying is that these guys are not, they're not feisty. They're all full of love. Hey, they practice what they preach. Okay, so
yeah, they're sweet young gentlemen.
Full of chocolate and flowing.
Yes, they're civilized young men. Maybe that's how I should put it. They're so civilized, especially in their armchairs.
We're not civilized at all. We're not civilized.
Maybe that's why they're not recording with us tonight. We're not civilized that far. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Just let you guys know. So let you guys know
busy guys with their families and
stuff. So we're 4 people, and we have our own. If anybody doesn't know, you just came across my podcast, the Archive and the Daily Archetype and the Far Out Wisdom podcast. We all have been working together for almost a year now.
Yeah, we're friends. That's when we can talk a little shit, but it's in good love friends. And faith.
So we're on each other's podcast. So anyways, Connor Durting was talking about his experience on social media, that a lot of people, even if he tried to make a conversation that is not political, people always make it about politics.
Yeah, that's ideological possession.
Exactly. So
which goes into the topic of this, but go ahead.
Yeah. So there was a guy. I'm sorry, let me change the identity. There was a they.
an individual.
There was a they.
There was a they.
So the thing with Connor is that I admire about him, especially you too, Isaac. You are really good with your words. It's not you guys are not pretentious. You guys are not condescending.
Phonies.
You guys are not phonies, or you guys are not. You guys practice intellectual integrity. So anyways, this guy was just like attacking Connor, like just going. And so
he is leading the patriarchy by being a heterosexual cisgender white male. But
yeah, and so like he was pretty much like, if you guys have a chance, you can friend Connor. He's really easy. His profile is like really open to the world.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm looking at this discussion, and like this person was like, "You think like a typical white male for your age." What does that even mean? Like that really kind of blew me kind of off guard. So we know why. Well, we don't know why. Isaac and I don't have the answer. We're not telling you
for
anything
what?
like that. So basically, I honestly believe that the reason why they don't like Trump is what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. It's the Trumpian shadow.
Right.
So we are reading an article from Quillette, great magazine, by the way. And this and the article was published, have to remember, it's October 2nd, 2017. So this was about like a year into, the first 6 months
of the first term of Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Okay.
Yeah.
So
we're almost into the second term.
So it's basically the Jung, that's pretty much the article, Jung and the Trumpian Shadow, and it's by Alexander Blum. I heard about him a couple of times. So Carl Jung was done by a disservice by the sanitized spirituality of the New Age movement. Jungian archetypes were shoved into the same bucket as the zodiac, astrology, and healing crystals, lost in the blur of wishful thinking that had captured late 1960s and 70s, and its desire to create a better society out of love and mercy alone. But the short-lived optimism of the sexual revolution and the hippie movement met its demise in the 1980s. This is when Reagan came into power in the United States of America. And this is the year that the decade that me and Isaac was born, by the way.
What's up? Little babies being born in the 80s.
Yeah, crack babies. When the Reagan administration saw the rebels hang up their flowers and instead of don suits, taken to Madison Avenue and extinguishing the flame of creative renaissance that wanted so badly to break free from the Cold War West. Okay. And perhaps there's some parallel here with the Obama years. And the Obama years when me and Isaac was in our voting age. Right. My first president that I voted for. I graduated high school in 2006. 2006. And then I was in college when Obama came into power, and I voted for Obama, by the way. So, so perhaps there's some parallel with the Obama years culminating in the election of Donald Trump. During the Obama presidency, American progressive became pacified, trading economic arguments for cultural dissatisfaction, forsaking the idea of the New Deal for an emotional. The New Deal is, by the way, guys, it's what's his name? Freaking Roosevelt in the 1930s. The New
FDR.
Deal. FDR, for an emotional and ideological clamp upon the unconscious forces of racism and sexism. There was a pervasive sense that history had ended, that a centrist Democrat could potentially rule the West forever, and that shadows of racism, sexism, and hate speech would finally be chased out of public society after the victory of Hillary Clinton, a female president. I have no idea why they fucking brought that up, by the way. So,
I
like
know
the
why.
female. So why do you think they brought it up? But like, you know what I think it is? Like, I think it's kind of sexist in a way, because if you ever seen me and Isaac go at it, you know damn well that I will bite him. Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Mentally, not. We haven't even met in person, so not physically.
Why did you say mentally? You don't know me.
Oh well, I mean, unless you're like hiding in a bush around here somewhere, I don't know.
Mentally.
Okay, yeah. Well, and hey, the mental bites are probably worse than the physical bites, because physical bites. I'm not saying you're like a weak person or anything, but physical bites you can just like throw some dirt on it, maybe a Band-Aid, but the mental ones, they can like get down in that mind and like rearrange your complexes.
You know damn well I cannot get to you, by the way. Isaac is very strong mentally because of the fact that
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I'm just better at not letting it because conflicts are like a what's the word? Something like, okay, I think of conflicts now as like martial arts, and
he thinks about martial art like Bruce Lee.
Okay. Hey, I listen to Alan Watts a lot, just like you, okay? And he talks about Muramutu Mushish, whatever.
You have to flow like water.
No, I wasn't even thinking of Bruce Lee. I was thinking of the guy who wrote the Book of Five Rings. And he's look, I'll tell you a quick story, okay? Quick little story is that this is like a famous story of Muramuto Musashi, the like most famous samurai of all time. And he said, and he, samurais, they like dress a certain way and they have their swords with them. And so this is a true story that he was on this boat, going around Japan or whatever. And there was this drunken samurai that met him there randomly. And he said, "Oh, you're a samurai. I will fight you." And so
why you make it the Japanese sound like they're Spanish?
I don't know. I'm just bad at voices, but I'm practicing. So he said, "Excuse me, sir. I'm a drunk samurai, and I would like to fight you." Anyway, but he says, "What school are you from?" To Musashi. And Musashi says, "I'm from the school of no swords." And the drunken samurai says, "I don't know the school of no swords." And he says, "Well, I can teach you about it, but we'd have to duel." And the drunken samurai says, "Well, let's duel." And he says, "Well, we can't duel here on this ship because we could, get kicked off and we could hurt people and do damage here on this ship. There's not even very much room. Let's, I don't know, I guess the ship was traveling slow or whatever. But he said, let's just go to that little island over there. We'll get off on this little rowboat, lifeboat, whatever. And we'll go over there and we'll duel out there on the island. And then we'll figure out what happens after that. We'll have a duel to the death." And so the drunken samurai gets on the little boat, and Musashi pushes off the little boat, and he says, "This is your lesson from the school of no swords." And everyone laughs as he drifts away, and that's the end of the battle.
So pretty much he pushed him off the boat.
Well, I mean, he was fine. He was on the little boat, but he couldn't keep up with the big boat. But the point is that he avoided the fight, and you've usually got to avoid fights. So same thing with conflict in regular life is that the moral of the story is that if you can avoid making it worse, then that's probably better. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that like you didn't
like a female, like,
well, no, it doesn't mean that. What I'm saying is it doesn't mean that like you like, so if somebody hurts you or whatever, that's fine to be hurt or whatever. But if you give them that, if you give into it, like, "Oh no, you're a stupid libtard or whatever the case that you're fighting about, then nobody wins. But if you can walk away from it, then oftentimes people will become the better for it instead of stupid people that got in a silly fight or whatever. So that's kind of the moral of the story.
Yeah.
So which is, and we can sort of tie that to our thing we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Which is how much that we give into the sort of darkness or shadow or toxicity of the time. But what we were getting at with at this particular moment was why Hillary was a big deal. And but the thing is, this is my big problem with politics now. If you look at the history of politics, and maybe it's just because I'm like a couple years older or whatever.
You're not that old.
I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to have witnessed this transition that I'm about to present. The transition was in the 20th century up until like 10, 15-ish years ago. The Conservative Party, GOPs, Republicans, whatever, they were moralistic about it, but it was in so doing as like, give us our, religious freedoms and like moralizing through freedom. But what happened in the transition at some point, like through the Obama years or something. Well, actually what I think what happened that was strange about it is that it happened like in my like adult lifetime, a little bit during Clinton, and then even more during George W. Bush, where they started to be these like moralizing people. And then same thing with like, especially Obama, because it was like, oh, if you ever even question anything about Obama, then you're obviously a racist.
Right.
And then the whole thing with Hillary was like, oh, we had all this hope that a woman could win. And because of like, oh, it just means so much if like woman, and all this stuff.
Right.
Which is like the same thing with our potentially possible next president, where it's like, obviously he said he's planning to resign after a few weeks. And then we've got to deal with, I don't know how.
President Harris, that's going to come into power.
Yeah. And then the whole thing is, we doubly can't say anything against her because she's like a minority and a female, and all that. So anyway, the whole thing is politicians trying to be moral authorities, where politicians should not be moral authorities. Politicians should deal with politics, which is limiting the government and following the Constitution, and that's about it. I mean, sure, there could be some moralness in there when it comes to maybe certain things that they think they need to do, like regulating to keep businesses from killing people, that kind of stuff. But to like be this moral authority of like, we need to look to our politicians for like being racist or sexist or not, or being misogynist or not. And the reality is, if we have a president or a senator or anybody else, and they're doing good at their holding up the Constitution, but they aren't a moral authority, you know what that makes them? A human that's doing their job. Compared to these fake little like virtue signalers of, it's like a new form of mixing church and state is the way that I look at it. Except now,
so you're talking about like a new religion that was born after.
Yeah, well, because it's especially now that like, even though maybe a lot of people, most people, especially even in politics, they'll identify as I believe in God, or I'm a Christian or whatever, but they're not really practicing those beliefs. They're more of like these love and light people, like was talked about a little bit at the beginning of this article, the sort of this like new age spiritual but not religious thing.
Yeah.
But then then how that gets into politics, like the whole thing that this nation was founded on is that we want to have churches do the moral stuff. And it can be any kind of church, even if it's like Church of Satan wants to say,
"Oh, I know where you're going. I know you're going at."
But then the politicians have to do the political stuff that has nothing to do with morality, unless it's embedded in the Constitution already, which is life, liberty, and property originally.
Yeah.
So, and because what that does is it actually gives a higher moral authority that transcends it, because then it puts the moral authority on the individual person.
Yeah.
Rather than like this king of the free world to dictate what is, and then and this is where the shadow gets in, because then we project onto Trump or Obama or potentially a female leader or whoever, like
right.
They are the ideal, or the shadow comes in where it's like they are the devil, or what happens with this sort of Trumpian shadow that's talked about in this piece is that they're like bad people project moral authority on Trump, because what they do is like all the racists and all the misogynists and xenophobics and deplorables are all about Trump, where it's like, I don't care if they are whatever, as long as it doesn't violate the Constitution. Whoever votes for whoever, cool. It's not like, that's not to say that like being a Nazi is cool, but per the Constitution, the government is just supposed to do government stuff, like maintain the borders and I guess the roads and whatever else that is the government, and leave morality to the individuals and other independent organizations.
Right. And so basically, like when you're reading this article, when during the time in 2016, when everything was starting to explode, well, it's starting to kind of, like the right and the left, they were starting to rumble. I felt like people were like looking for Hillary Clinton, like just like a mother figure in a way, because the fact that they were just like, when mommy comes into power, racism and sexism and xenophobia is going to disappear. That's not how it works. But the article did a very good job. He connected Jung. So he said Jung would not have been surprised by what followed. In the philosophical tree, he wrote, "Feeling the conscious mind with ideal conceptions is a characteristic of Western theosophy." I think that's how you pronounce it. Theosophy. But not the confrontation with the shadow and the world of darkness. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So that's pretty much ties to what Isaac is saying as well. So the article continues, American progressives believe that through a respectable politics, the psychology of hatred, just like you said, Isaac, could be repressed through a combination of censorship and social pressure. They imagined that the march of progress was so inevitable that by shaming and denying the power of our worst impulses, we could create a paradise. But the ghosts of theosophy still haunt our politics. It seems today that the branches of Jewish Kabbalah, tree of Seraphot, I think I pronounced that correctly, answering to a cosmetic balance between mercy and severity. Let me see. Yeah, it has an. I think it says, as Valentin Telmberg wrote in his mystical magnum ops, Meditation of the Tarot, has been ignored in favor of mercy alone, compassion, empathy, and tolerance, all bundled into a package of political correctness. These forces alone will squash the shadow, our lower nature, and save us. Such was the promise of contemporary political correctness. But Jung would have suggested that the political correct are ignoring the very real severity in their own nature. And he said, everyone carries a shadow, and the last it is embodied in the individual's conscious life. The blacker and denser it is, if it's repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected. And Jung was not talking about black people, by the way, okay? Let's not get all PC and shit. But that's what he was talking about. Like, if you conceal, because let's face it, like, all the leftists that we have come across, we're not statistician or we're not mathematicians or anything like that, but majority of the people that I come across that are like Biden and Harris. I'm not saying Biden and Harris are all bad, because I have friends who are Biden and Harris supporter, but let's face it, your side is just as disgusting, just as brutish, and just as immature as the other side. You know what I mean? And they think that it's like, it's how I see it is, and you can jump in, is that it's like their own like separate religion. Like you have the feminists, they worship the female, right? And then you have the black activists, they worship quote unquote, and this is what I see they write, okay? They worship being black or their blackness. And then you have the whites and their whiteness or Asianness. You see the Asian crowd too. Like it's like they're broke into like their little kind of institutionalized religion.
This intersectionality that has become their new dogma or ideology. This is another issue I might try to get into. It's kind of trying to clarify the this Jordan Peterson stuff. Not right away, but maybe sometime in the next.
You listen to Jordan Peterson, you're a sexist.
Oh my god, I'm such a sexist, Marxist, or I don't know what I would be. A fascist. I have to be a fascist if I listen.
You're like a sexist person.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how you guys sound like if you are.
Yeah. No, but okay. The thing with the whole Peterson thing is he plays a tricky game that. And that he gets caught on, which is the whole postmodernist neo-Marxism thing. And that's probably where he gets the most criticism, and some of it, you could say validly so. But I think it's early on in his sort of like debating, you could even hear in his Kathy Newman thing, and this is why I put it on my episode 0 and things like that, is because they talked about how sometimes he compared left-wing activists to Chairman Mao of...
I think that's where he made the mistake,
No, actually, I think that's where he was right, because that's more accurate.
You're talking about like Maoism. Okay, Maoism.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's because that's more accurate than postmodernist neo-Marxist, because what happened was... and this is again why I put this on my episode 0 of this reading from Mao's book on contradiction, where he also quoted Lenin. So Lenin, who took his stuff directly from Marx, but he brought in intersectionality as this stuff of power, although it didn't really become a thing of intersectionality so much at that time. It was more just about economic stuff at that point.
Like class struggle.
Yeah. And so then that went from Lenin, but he was already talking about every kind of power, and then Mao, and so Mao fell only when he died in the 70s, and that's really when these other philosophers maybe sort of picked it up, and then it kind of like, and also to the point of this article, this is one area where I think they got this wrong a bit, is that they were like, okay, the certain people were like one way in the 60s, like with like all this like love and whatever, taking Carl Jung's philosophies and just applying it to New Ageism, but in like a whole like love and light way. And then they went into the stock market or whatever. And I think that's wrong, because there were like two different groups of people. So like the love and light hippies or whatever, they either became drug addicts and died or whatever, or if they survived all that and didn't go into like communes or cults or anything, they got jobs at the universities. The ones who went and infiltrated Wall Street and everything, like Gordon Geckos and all that, those weren't the hippies. Those were the people who were going to the universities before the universities were co-opted by the hippies and the communists and the neo-Marxists, as Jordan Peterson might say. Although really I think what's more accurate is to say like neo-Leninists or it's not even neo, it's like exactly the way that Lenin and Mao talk about it in their books. So that's sort of the thing to clarify, is that Lenin and Mao were always making this thing about power, and anything that puts somebody in power makes them a oppressor, even if like it's being born white or, you know, being born cisgender, those kind of things nowadays.
Right. It's like a sin being white.
Well, right. So it's like the new evil. And so to the point of how to handle a shadow, the whole thing with building up a shadow and making a shadow worse and worse, like, and you can see this throughout all of history, whether it's in any known history, the way you build it up is basically through war. Like the reason that you had Hitler is because of World War I. Like if you listen to Jordan Peterson talk about Hitler, you know that. But if you hear anybody talk about Hitler, you know that Hitler or Germany was basically wiped out through a horrible loss in World War One, and they were just
they got their asses kicked. And I did talk about this with the Mahatma Gandhi letter to Adolf Hitler, where I broke down what happened in World War II. But go ahead.
Well, and so that happened at the same time as they were going through other issues in Germany, including their economic issues. That what happened then is they had basically their life sucked, right? Just like right now, the whole world can say our life sucks.
Yeah, and they were humiliated. Yeah, they were embarrassed.
Right. So like right now in 2020, 2021, when we want to be like our life sucks, like it would be good if it was like when this COVID stuff first started back in like March, April, there was some like compassion, like come together, let's help each other kind of thing. But then after we figured out that, it's not the end of the world, then shadow starts coming out because it's not the end of the world, but the world that's here kind of sucks right now, or at least compared to the previous year. So let's start breaking shit and blaming people. So same thing with the shadow of World War II or leading up to it, where basically they wanted somebody to blame, and most of their landlords or a lot of them were Jews, and the Jewish people were running their target, and they were running their banking system, or they had these loans going on and all this stuff, and so basically they became that receptacle for the projection of the shadow. And that's something important to understand about the shadow. The shadow comes from the person who's like offended by it. So there are like real, I don't know, evil people in the world. But the interesting thing is like, okay, let's say the Third Reich and Hitler are evil, for example. Cool. We can agree on that. But what makes them, what made them increasingly evil, and even what made like that whole thing go back and forth to like, what is that nuclear explosion is like literally what brought World War II to its conclusion years later, was the back and forth of like, no, you're evil. No, the Jews are evil. No, the Germans are evil. No, it's the dirty Americans. No, it's the this and that. Where the answer is, it's part of, it's like what we talked about last time with the polarity. The answer is coming together, which is kind of what we're getting a little bit better at in the modern world, mostly because wars aren't fought anymore through bullets and missiles so much, unless you're in Nashville, but that's another story. Bullets or wars are now fought through information canceling, and the economic war.
Yep.
That kind of wars. Stuff.
Yeah. So, but
to put a bow on that, basically it's, you make a shadow worse by constantly projecting and blaming some other person, even if maybe they did do something wrong. Right. So it's just like if you and I had a fight, for example, you could say like, hey,
which we did, by the way. All right.
So for example, you could say, hey, you're a stupid, annoying person. And I could say, well, no, you're a stupid, annoying person. And then what was originally just like, I was maybe being silly, stupid, annoying, having a bad mood, whatever, was just that, and that could have been it.
And then I decoded the wrong way. So basically, me and Isaac, our relationship is like, have you guys ever seen the meme where, hey, fuck you, hey Tony, fuck? That's pretty much me and Isaac, our relationship. We just yell at each other across the room, and that's what we do. But continue on, Isaac.
Once in a while, but the point is that we could, at some point you have to stop making it worse, by kind of like walking away, even if you have to for a week or two. And then at some point you can put it back together or come back to the middle and negotiate. So same thing with countries and our divided nation right now. You can make it worse and worse and worse by being like, it's the libtards' fault. No, it's the conservative deplorables' fault. And that'll just make both sides' shadows worse and worse and worse until there's explosions of people dying and all this other stuff.
Exactly. And so the article will pretty much point out Isaac's point, and it continues. It is no mistake that the locker room talk and telling it like it is was pitted against the false high horse of when they go low, we go high, just like you said.
Yep.
Donald Trump embodied the subconscious truth that the world is more shadow than light, that severity is more. Oh, no, I think I read that already. Sorry. No, I didn't. Those who advocate the censorship for hate speech online or in the public sphere are fully willing to accept severe authoritarianism in the name of mercy, an open contradiction. Conservatives, particularly in the intellectual tradition of Alexander Solzhenitsyn and other anti-communists, believe that the angelic heights of humankind are forever tried to their immutable and hellish depths. Every inch of striving towards a perfect world is met with an inch of striving toward absolute hell. This is the idea proposed by Jung, who said, the fact is that if one tries beyond one's capacity to be perfect, the shadow descends into hell and becomes the devil, just like you said, Isaac, where it's like a kind of like a battle between ideas.
Right.
This has consequential implication for the political world. If we strive to be a utopian and erase all forms of inequality, sweep away all profanity, heal the wounds of racism, and take ourselves off the cross of sin, our own lesser nature will double back against us and refuse motions every step of the way.
Yep.
And this way, the utopian unknowingly digs his own grave. This was certainly during the case with communism through the 20th century. But this fallibility of human perfection continues seamlessly forever. So that's pretty much the point that you're making. It's like a battle between, like the Nazi was like, the National Socialism, we have the idea to humanity. Oh no, the communists, the Stalinists, we have the idea.
Yeah, it's kind of like a whack-a-mole game. The game where like a mole jumps up and you got to like smash it, and another one jumps up, and it's like that, and until and that's what we've done for known history. In fact, this is the closest thing to like world peace that we've had in human history is what we have right now. Although again, it's kind of that way, but it's kind of just because it's like I quote or talk about Yuval Noah Harari's book a lot, where he talks about capitalism being the most successful of modern religions, and we can get into that another time. But basically, the capitalist creed of I don't remember how I put it, but capital is the supreme authority and wealth. What that does is that makes it so that we are making these choices based on economic principles. So, and that's why for a long time it was understood that, okay, we need to like go into war and lie about weapons of mass destruction, or even if they didn't necessarily lie, it was like, we want to believe in weapons of mass destruction because we make a lot of money by going into war. But now we've gotten to another point where it's like makes less economic sense to, run around and go to war, which is kind of funny because now on the way out by Donald Trump, or maybe on the way into his second term, we'll see. He is getting all these potential peace awards or at least peace deals signed and everything, which he should get some credit for that. But at the same time, it's also a lot of the things that usually happen like that, especially these, are it's not like, oh, Obama needs to have credit. No, it's just the nature of the time. The time is that people just, they don't want to be shelling missiles at each other constantly. Some people do, and there's some, but it's just the nature of the times is now that they're like, it's just not a time where we're going to like drive around with tanks and missiles. And if there is any war, it's either like I said, economic, cyber, or drone strikes. But before, what we would do is, like I said, whack-a-mole, like, oh, we're going to destroy you. No, we're going to destroy you. No, we're going to destroy you. And what that does is it just builds up hate on both sides more and more and more until there's nuclear explosions. And that's what we're going through now. And the other thing that happens on top of that I think people need to learn more about, and it's something I've been talking about a little bit more as I've been getting deeper into this Jungian stuff, is what makes shadow actually is these things that we're talking about and the things in the article, but it's also complexes. And so complexes are like, well, they're what kind of like go on top of the the true archetypes. So like a true archetype would be like, okay, there's a universal archetype that's like the mother and father archetype, and that has its healthy natural way to be. And then there's like the true archetypes of our consciousness, like shadow and ego and persona, the self, and the Jungian terms. And those have a healthy way to be. But what happens that brings about abnormality and shadow and things is there gets to be these not universal, but more personalized or with a group complex. And so that happens even like somebody has a bad just father complex or mother complex, and then they project that out onto bigger and bigger. Yeah, that's on an individual level, but eventually, and I think what's going on a lot in the sort of modern world is a lot of the modern world is having daddy issues. And so then they're having mommy issues just because of how that the recent generations have been, falling apart in the homes. And so then they project that out onto the whole group of, we need, and what that is, that has to do with a longing for chaos, or that battle between chaos and order, or who's going to bring the order. Is it going to be the group mama or the group daddy, which is exactly what goes on when we're talking about people like Trump versus people like, love and light Biden, or I'll tell you whatever you want to hear, Biden, Harris, whoever. It's like this group complex of a mother or a father.
And it made a good transition, by the way.
Yes.
And so it said in this essay titled Feminism and the Problem of Super Toxic Masculinity, political scientist Justin Murphy makes an unconventional argument, encouraging men to be passive, polite, and non-offensive through social pressure. Most men would conform to that feminist standard out of a genuine unwillingness to be abrasive or do harm. But a small number of men who cannot be shamed in a world filled with men who refuse to check them, will begin to dominate and rise through social hierarchies due to the simple fact that nobody knows how to stop those few men who embody the intolerable shadow that the masses have pressed away. Murphy writes, the problem is that when the baseline of masculine dominance expression is held below its organic tendency, defined simply as what men would do in the absence of cultural campaign to defang it, this increased the potential payoff to those who dare to exercise it, as there are more resources to dominate precisely to the degree that other men are not contesting them. This is why Trump dominated the 2016 debates. By the way, if you guys ever have a chance to watch that, make sure, because Trump was just beating everybody in that one. So one can clearly see this during the 2016 Republican primaries. Jeb Bush was far closer to the feminist male ideal than Donald Trump ever was.
The beta.
Bush was a tepid, meek, and asked for polite apologies. Trump refused to apologize, bullying him and bulldoze him. So that's pretty much what they talk about, where it's more like the Jeb was just like, I'm sorry. He was. So we have a series called Rick and Morty, and that's pretty much where
he was being a Jerry.
He's being a Jerry. That's pretty much the term that we use in the Rick and Morty crowd. He was being a Jerry. Jerry Smith is your typical fucking cut male, right?
Yeah,
he does everything for Beth. He's like, Beth is the masculine kind of female, and so she dominates him.
Well,
so that's pretty much-
and the thing with a person like that, or that type of character, it's not just like, I'm gonna do things for the woman that I love, and here's this like chivalrous gesture of my love, baby. It's like, tell me what you want me to do. Tell me what you want me to do. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And the other person doesn't always just want to like have a slave on a leash to tell what to do. That's another Rick and Morty episode we might get into. Is when
I think we're going to be doing the one where we talk about masculinity, but then we're going to be talking about Jerry Smith in particular. And so
actually, the one that they did on that, they're like intergalactic mytho characters or whatever.
Yeah,
with their intergalactic what do you call it? Marriage counseling.
Yeah.
It does have a lot to do with what it was like, each other's shadows and each other's anonymous projections and things like that. So that one will actually be really interesting for this kind of talk.
Yeah. So it's just like it talks about like you have to remember that Donald Trump was born in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Okay, he wasn't born in the 80s or anything like that. Would mean Isaac was. We were taught to be special. We're special.
Well, I mean, that's why,
yeah.
like, what's his name? Sanders is kind of the same way. You know,
Bernie Sanders. How old is Bernie Sanders anyway? Like fucking 1800s?
No, I mean he's like, I don't think he's
like
80
something.
No,
he's 80.
I don't know if he's anyway. He's old, and he's from New York, and so he's extreme left wing or whatever. But he's like a no nonsense, like screw you. We need to like do this politic thing.
Get to the fucking point. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not the beta male, even if he's extreme left.
Yeah. You can be a leftist and not be a fucking pussy, by the way, if that makes sense. Because look at this way. So I come across a group of people called the third positionists. If you guys don't know what the third positionist is, let me explain. The third positionist.
Yeah, what sex position is it?
The third position people are national communists.
Oh, they do more than communists. They do more. Is that what? So what sex position is the communist position? There's the missionary position and the communist position. Okay, go ahead.
So like the third positions is pretty much they don't like communism and they don't like capitalism. Like, okay, no. Let me take.
And they don't like the missionary position.
So like the Marxists, they don't like Marxism. They don't like capitalism. So pretty much everything that they do is for the state, by the state. It's like fascist, but not fascist. Does that make sense? Sort of. So yeah, so they're like in between the two, and they're starting to look kind of, good, I guess, because with people like us, we're like tired of the
well, you mentioned them when we talked
a couple times. But
the thing is that it's kind of stupid because that's already what we are. We are forever, really since the dawn of democracy. It's always been different forms of a mix of what you might call socialism or democratic socialism or communism or something like that, and a mix of something more like democracy and freedom and what we have that's supposed to be in our own constitution. It's always been a mix of that. So it's kind of silly to be like, hey guys, we have this new idea. It's called the third position. It's like, no, you're just rebranding what we've been doing for.
It's been around for in Romania. I think it was Ceausescu was a national communist. I think so. Yeah. And he was executed with his wife on TV. So
on TV.
But that's pretty much what they're trying to do. They're trying to mix everything together into two. And I don't know the answer to it, but I hope that this article will kind of open it because it says that, the victory of Donald Trump was another story about who we really are. And so but how do we confront the brute within our own souls? This is where the election of Donald Trump suggested that denying and bullying away our sins will only cause them to multiply. Hillary Clinton's disastrous campaign was encapsulated in a disastrous slogan: "America is already great." This cry for the eternal now, a permanent extension of the bloodless elite sensibilities of the Democratic Party, with all its entitlement to the votes of minorities and the poor, invoked a kind of rebellion in people. It emerged on the left in the figure of Bernie Sanders. For all his faults, he projected an understanding of pain of the working people and advocated policies designed to regenerate America's social safety net. When he vanished from the race, there was only one person who spoke of American society, and consequently the American soul, as deeply rotten as it was, and it wasn't Hillary Clinton. From his comments about the violence in America's inner cities to the hell of Chicago, his infamous history of sexual assault and lust, the belittling of his opponents, and his overall severe demeanor, Donald Trump was a far more authentic representation of the human spirit than the sanitized public relations sensibilities that drove Hillary Clinton to defeat. Casting him as the brute did not work. We already know the world is brutal, and Clinton has herself been implicated in American history of racial oppression for the 1994 Clinton crime bill, which exacerbated the crisis of 1 in 4 Black children born in 1990 growing up with a parent in prison in prison, to her State Department advocating to cut the Haitian minimum wage down to 31 cents an hour. Clinton was hit hard from the left on both issues, with no more high grounds to stand on. All we had was polished corruption, starting brazen rebellion in the face. Better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven, cried the Rust Belt, as it betrayed the Democrats who felt entitled to their votes and joined the ranks of the deplorable. Who are in the eyes of the elite liberal America were nothing more than a ranks of the damn. So yeah, that's what we see so far, and it's just like when he got elected, it's just like just like I always say to my shadows, like that gooey stuff came out. I mean, during like the whole Donald Trump phase. I don't know about you, Isaac, if you feel the same way that I do, but I felt like my shadow was, and we all have a shadow within us. We all have a female, a male within all of us, but my shadow erupted out as well. And yeah, you guys have to remember that my son was born in 2015. This is when during Donald Trump was running for president during that period of time. And like, I never had anger issues. I never had like any of that stuff, and you know this, Isaac. But after he was born, I think with everything that was going around me, I think it's because the fact that I maybe because I was a shitty person as is, but it made me recognize and respect my opposites a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like like the story that I said about my dad. I was judging him. Right, but at the same time, I can be fucking radicalized too.
Yeah, I mean that's the exact thing that builds up a shadow, is to keep projecting it and say, no, because what you're doing as you project out on someone else, whether it's your actual father or a father figure in culture, a president or someone else in wherever, it's like the more you can be like, that person's so evil, that person's so bad, that person's so bad. Yeah. What it's doing is it's isolating and protecting your ego from realizing that it is itself bad, because it builds you up. The more you can like tear someone down, especially if they're an authority person, then the more you have inflated your own ego. And that's not like anyone special for doing that. This is what we've been doing for forever. Let me read a short paragraph from Robert Greene's Laws of Human Nature on the Shadow. The solution is not more repression and correctness. We can never alter human nature through enforced niceness. The pitchfork doesn't work, nor is the solution to seek release for our shadow in the group, which is volatile and dangerous. Instead, the answer is to see our shadow in action and become more self-aware. It is hard to project onto others our own secret impulses or over-idealize some cause once we have made aware of the mechanism operating within us. Right. Through such self-knowledge, we can find a way to integrate the dark side into our consciousness productively and creatively. For more on this, see the next chapter. Doing so, we become more authentic and compassionate, exploiting to the maximum our creative energies naturally in the process. So that's kind of what we've been saying for a few minutes, that if you try to project it on others and force it out, it will always make it worse. Like, people need to be like that little message that we've been talking about needs to be like what everybody is talking about. It's like, hey, exactly. And like, that's why every time it comes up in like my Facebook group or anything, I'm like, hey, you're just projecting. Hey, that's just like shadow or complex or whatever. And what that does too, it's kind of like that ninja samurai move or whatever, just to avoid because if somebody like attacks me or whoever, then I can be like, oh, no, you're stupid. No, you're a libtard. No, you're whatever. And then it just makes it worse and worse and worse. But if you isolate the issue, that's like, what are we really talking about? Oh, look, here this is a little psychological projection going on. So, okay, let's not do that. Let's do this and see if we can solve the issue. Then it like exercises the demon, really. which is really what's
guys,
going on. Otherwise, it's
if you guys have,
possession. But go ahead.
If you guys have a chance, the Daily Archetype, he did had a reverend, or not reverend, sorry, somebody who did, he does, I think he's like, that's what he does, right? Did you double check? Well, anyways, that episode's really good. Make sure you don't listen to it by yourself, because some weird shit will happen to you, by the way. So I'm not lying, by the way. So I listened to it before bed and I had nightmares.
Oh, okay.
But very good episode. It's one of my episodes on the Daily Archetype. So, but the thing is that Isaac and I are not perfect. We're not. We are just regular people just like you. And if you guys have a chance to check out the podcast that Joe Rogan did with Dr. Peterson when he first started, where he talks about the monster. Yeah. He said, release that monster. Now, Peterson is not necessarily telling you to let it all out. What he's trying to do is for you to recognize that you are capable of bloodthirsty violence.
Your own evil, and then you can release it in healthy ways, which is through you can release it out through creativity, just like through your work or art projects or hobbies, or just by and so much of it just changes by purely the fact that, like, your life, the way that you look, the way that everything just changes just by that one simple fact of a person saying to themselves, because normally people just try to hide it and deny it. They say, I am capable of any and all evil. And everybody knows this, but they want to deny it. But the more they can say, I am capable of any and all evil. I'm capable of murdering people and eating people. I'm capable of raping people and kicking puppies and punching babies. I'm capable of all of that. Just by the pure fact that you're a human being. Every single one of you listeners, every single one of me, my family, Boone, everybody, we're all capable of that. Now, as soon as you admit that, rather than saying it's other people, you've done most of the job right there.
Exactly. And I honestly believe that's why a lot of people did not like Peterson.
Right, because they told him that truth, and then what happens then is they have those complexes in themselves, and those complexes that want to survive because they have their own autonomous sort of consciousness. They're like personalities and demons in a way, not necessarily literally demons, but they will, like, sometimes when you see people like going at somebody like Peterson or whatever, it's like an ideological
or Trump, by the way,
or Trump, yeah, anybody like that. It's like because they have no idea what these guys believe or think or have any idea about them in their real lives, but they're just focusing on, like, this hurts my ideology, and most of all, though, it hurts that fact that they've defended so much their whole life, that them, every single person is capable of total evil, and every single person is, like, their mom is capable of it, their grandma, their every single human being. Who knows?
Your grandma was probably a Nazi.
Could have been. I mean, I don't think mine was, but actually, I made a post on that. Not a Nazi, but maybe I could tell that story real quick. No, but I had an experience the last couple of years when I was trying to, like, sort myself out, that I realized my grandma used to just, like, talk to me sometimes when I would just be, like, hanging out with her, helping her clean her house, whatever. And wow, she would tell me how it was weird, because it was just this kind of person, like, her husband, my grandfather, died a couple of years earlier, and so she just had to, like, talk. She's that kind of extroverted person. She needed somebody to talk to, and she would say some weird stuff sometimes for, like, a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid to hear, like that. And she's, like, talking about serving in World War II, and I think I might have mentioned part of this to you one time, but how that, like, in World War II, her job was, this when, like, filming things was first becoming a thing, and so the government was... Oh
my God, was your grandma a porno star?
No, that's for another podcast. We might get into that, of who nobody knows who my oldest aunt's father was, but it's not from porno. It's like, it could have been, that father could have been the engineer of the Golden Gate Bridge, or it could have been Robert Stack, the original host of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
Anyway, she lived out in Hollywood, and she was a little bit like, hey, 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 hey. But that's another story.
Are you talking about your nana or your auntie?
My grandma was like had her fun after World War II, but during World War II, she was telling me how that she would make these. Her main job was to be making these films and like quality checking them and everything. With these films that were like the original World War II documented films of like, we got to see what's going on, and so they would have. And this is back when people had barely ever done that before, barely ever, used, movies were still new and people just barely had TVs. They mostly had radio at that time. So right. she told me these stories sometimes how that she would have, drinks with these guys, like soldiers, one night, and be laughing with them, dancing, whatever. And then the few days later, they're gone, and she sees them like washed up, dead bodies in these films. And she's like crying, but I was like, whatever, didn't get it when I'm like an 8-year-old or whatever. But she's like,
right.
And I didn't want to hate them. And so basically she's like saying that which is one really interesting thing. As much as we talk about how racist our past is towards Black people,
mm-hmm.
at least for those decades, 2 or 3-ish decades after World War II, there was overt racism towards Asian people, especially Japanese. And like in the media, like, hey, Japanese are horrible kind of stuff. Like on, Bugs Bunny's famous for it and everything, of like denigrating Asian people purely because of the things that went on. And actually that was like a whole shadow thing where it's like, they made us drop the Hiroshima bomb and all these things that we felt a lot of guilt for, and that we still feel to this day. And that we then went out later and like helped build up Japan, through at least the 80s, where they were one of the strongest economies in the world, or maybe 90s. Anyway, so it was interesting how that my grandma like probably had this racism toward Asians, but understanding why, not that justifies it, but that it's for.
There's a root.
Yeah, there's roots, and that there is this. There's this regret with it for, decades later, or several decades later, telling her grandkids, like crying about it, how that like she didn't want to hate, but she did because she would see those as those who killed her friends, and then
I see.
Yeah. And then my other grandparents on my dad's side, I didn't hear so many stories, but I know that they dealt with it in different ways because they made a big deal of sponsoring certain like Asian families that would come to America for a long time. So that was like a thing that was going on. And so it's like we as a nation have always been dealing with this in different ways. And
suppressing it's not going to be like
political
correct. It's not going to solve it. Yeah,
right.
It's going to just make it come out.
The only way to deal with it is to be able to talk about it,
honest conversation. Yeah,
honest conversations, and bring it up, and not just the projection and forcing. Like it's not even like an advanced psychology thing. Like sometimes we have fun talking about it. It's just that if you just constantly go back and forth with the war of, no, you're a worse person, no, you're a worse person, no, you're racist, no, you're a libtard, whatever, it just gets worse and worse and worse until there's a nuclear bomb, Hiroshima.
Exactly. A lot of people get like stuck in the middle of it. So to finish the article off, I had to like skip a couple, but it's pretty much what we talked about anyways. Alexander continued. He said, we do not live in the best of all possible worlds. There are monsters inside each of us. Those monsters must be made coherent and given their place, or they will consume us. What is the place of a monster? That, in many ways, is the purpose of life, to understand and tame the hell within you. But when we deny its power and seek to chain and ignore it, the monster only turns against us. When we claim we are good, it takes the throne and tells us we know nothing. We have much work to do. So that's it makes you think. And we're not calling you a bad person for hating Trump or anything like that, but I'm just tired of seeing these people like you 2020 election, the left won on that aspect. I mean, of course, Isaac's gonna say you fucking cheater, but with me, I
don't necessarily know that they cheated. I just want to know to what degree that was done.
To what degree? Yeah. So seeing like my friend Diana Black, she's a writer. I'm trying to get her on. She wrote to her progressive friends. She's like, you guys won. Why are you guys so fucking miserable?
Yeah.
And basically, Trump was just a temporary scapegoat to all your fucking problems. You're miserable.
Yeah.
And you're probably a miserable prick before this all started. You know what I mean? So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode with me and Isaac talking about this. And, this is what I say on the Fire Wisdom podcast. Come to FOW. Go to the Daily Archetype. Go into the archive.
Engage in the conversation.
Yes, about yourself and be honest with yourself. And I always make the joke that come to our podcast, listen to us tame our inner dragon bitch. So that's us.
Come on our podcast and engage in conversation. Start your own podcast, YouTube channel. Do something or do something creative.
Tame your inner slut dragon bitch. So Isaac, before we go, where can people find your information? I mean, of course, I link it all down below, but where can they find
the easiest way now is I just have dailyarchetype.com. So that has everything up there. There's not much to it right now, but at least has all the information, and I'll be adding more to that. But just go to dailyarchetype.com, one word, and then that'll have the social media and some blogs and podcasts and all that stuff.
So make sure you guys kind of, understand where we're coming from. We're not pointing fingers at you. We're not playing the what Alan Watts say, holier than art thou attitude. That's not where we're coming from. Me and Isaac have a big heart. Okay, we're squishy and we're lovable. Okay, but we're just asking you just to realize that.
We try to
stop playing the more.
Yeah, we try to transcend it if we can, and to not even necessarily take a side other than the side of like principles, and
we make fun of you, by the way. We're being honest. We're being honest.
You know what's I know we're wrapping it up, but what's a thing I might want to get into in the next few weeks or months is the whole debate of what's going on in the Star Wars universe is actually really interesting on these same topics. Not that I was ever a huge Star Wars nerd, but it's like it's turning this whole huge woke war of Kathleen Kennedy or whatever, trying to take it too far, not just to be like woke feminism, and that's fine, but to like denigrate male and masculinities and project that onto Luke Skywalker just because he was the hero before, and then they have to like tear down that character. And now other guys, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, are trying to bring back what she tried to ruin. And so there's that whole conflict going on in the Star Wars universe, similar actually to what's going on in our politics right now. So, which is just kind of this interesting thing where it's just like, these are psychological projections, manifestations, amplifications of just what we are. So that's all. We just all love each other, and we wanted to like do better at that. So
yeah,
but in the loving, you have to also acknowledge the dark side. There's good, and I don't know if I want to call that tough love, but it's like realistic.
We're not telling you to go beat up each other and get into like a fight or anything like that. Which I probably get MMA because I really want to bash people.
If you could do it in a safe way, like in the ring with some gloves on or whatever, that's cool.
Yeah, I would just love to just like a fucking fight club.
I wish we were the same size so we could like.
Isaac and I are not the same size. By the way, he's like 6'1,000.
What? I'm just barely over 6 feet tall, but I am probably.
Yeah, no, I think it's like you're like 6'2", I believe, right?
No,
6'2",
like 6'1".
6'1". So I'm like 5 feet. So I'd probably be up to like his belly, and he probably can like fuck me up. But the thing is, I always push him though. Like Isaac is like my elephant, and I'm like the mouse, and I just like to fuck with him. You know what I mean?
Test the limits.
Exactly. And that's what you guys need to do, is test the limits. And like I said, we're not telling you to troll, we're not telling you to bully or anything like that, but you guys have to realize that you hating Trump is pretty much just a reflection. I think that's what you said, a projection of you. So we're gonna sign off, and Isaac, you can sign off, and then I sign off if you have a sign off. You still don't have a sign off.
Stay archetypal. Don't be afraid of ghosts. It might just be a projection. Or no, what was I?
That's very enthusiastic, man.
And don't be afraid of ghosts until you get to know them. But do your sign off.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed this conversation, and to remember to not only stay far out, but tame that inner dragon bitch. Bye bye.